Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here. So this week we're covering chapter 18 in our text. So this is for week 6. And this is an interesting chapter. So there's like two or three big concepts. And I think that as far as the quiz goes and understanding the chapter, these larger concepts sort of help us with understanding of everything. So the big point is, and the chapter title is The West and a New Order. And so we're in this time period where we're in the 1600s, 1700s, somewhere in there, and there's a big change going on. And one of the first things that you'll learn about in this chapter is you'll learn about it's a time of scientific revolution, it's a time of the American Revolution, it's a time of the French Revolution. These are all at the tail end of the 1700s. And there's a lot of changes, and the sort of the overarching thought. There's two overarching thoughts. One of them is that history is very reactionary. So everything we're studying in this chapter, and actually in all the chapters, a good way to look at it is this idea of why did this event occur? What was it a reaction to? Was it a reaction to a natural disaster, or was it a reaction to something political like a war? That sort of thing. So sometimes these events that are reactions can be reactions to social conditions. So, for example, if everybody in the country is starving and there's no jobs and there's no money, people get upset, they start to rebel, they start to riot, and that's generally the way, or that is one way that a revolution can start. So, a reaction to starvation, a reaction to peasantry, a reaction to unequal wages and unequal treatment, I guess, always result in some sort of reaction, whether it's something like a riot or whether it's something bigger. So keep that in mind as you go through the chapter, because I want you to think about, action, reaction. Why did this happen? Because I think it makes the story a little bit better. The other thing, and probably bigger umbrella, is that at some point in time between the 1700s and the 1800s, when the chapter title says a new order, well, what they're talking about there is that the old ways are leaving us, and the old ways in this case are almost always built around religion and monarchy. Okay, so if you look at all of these cultures that we've studied so far, whether it's Asia or the Muslim countries in the Middle East, or whether it's Western Europe or the colonies in the Americas, the overarching theme is that there's always an old school, an old framework, and generally, especially in all the continents, Europe and Asia, and and getting into East Asia, all of those continents, there's this foundation of religion in place, and it's very ingrained in their culture. So would you just think about Christianity and think about Catholicism out of Rome, or just think about all of the Muslim empires that we've studied. These religious-based cultures, go back 2,000 years. And so, like, compare that to the United States, where we've only been in existence for 200 and some years. That's a whole different animal. So when you think about the importance of religion prior to the 1700s, you start to understand that the scientific revolution and the new order, in a way, is a reaction to the mysticism of religion, if you will, and also the movements towards reform in the new orders that come up in the 1700s and the 1800s, and the respect for natural law, that sort of thing. Everything based on rational science and rational thought. It's a reaction to the old kings and the old church that really controlled everything. So that's a good way to look at this chapter, and that's everything we're talking about here. So if I just go through, the first thing the book talks about is the scientific revolution, but you're also going to read about these philosophers, and the biggies are the French philosophers, so Montesquieu, Voltaire, Diderot, those guys. But everything they wrote about, and when you go through the text, you'll read this, and you can see it in my notes. Everything they wrote about was assumptions. So what their deal was, they said, hey, this is a religious assumption. This is an assumption about a king being anointed by God. So they're starting to dispel these old myths. And it's interesting to know, because I think a lot of it still comes out of print. That, after 200 or 300 years of print, we're starting to get these ideas to spread around. But a lot of this thought came out of Paris and came out of France. So you'll read about those guys, and then also in my reading notes, you'll read about Adam Smith, and also you'll read a little bit, I'm just looking through here, about Newton, because I kind of relate Newton's third law of motion to history, that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So you can read all that, and I won't get into it. So anyway, the bottom line this week is, everything's moving from sort of fantasy and unscientific and mysticism to stuff that's grounded in reality. And when you look at it, not only the scientific revolution, but you'll read about the heliocentric patterns of the planets, how Copernicus comes along and says, wait a minute, the sun, the sun doesn't rotate around the Earth. And so, you start to see these changes, and the breaking of old paradigms, if you will, the breaking of old beliefs, all happen within this 200-year period. So they call this, the beginning of the Enlightenment. And again, I talked earlier in the semester about, these trends and eras and sort of these naming frameworks in history. So certainly the Enlightenment's an important one, and it is marked by rational thought. So you're going to read about guys like John Locke and some other people who were these great Enlightenment thinkers, Adam Smith, the economist, so on and so forth. So read about the Industrial Revolution and the Scientific Revolution. One of the things you'll notice when you study like Japan and China and the Middle East and Great Britain and what's going to become the U.S. is that industrialization all happens at a different time. And historians, write a ton of books about, why didn't China industrialize until later, and why didn't Great Britain? And a lot of it has to do with these ingrained cultures. If you remember from our China reading, or maybe you don't, but one of the things that's really important in China is they revere agriculture. So that was a culturally ingrained thing, and since their religion was Confucianism, and Confucianism also revered agriculture. Like working off the land was the way to be a good guy. So these cultural things really kind of hold back the development of modernity, or modern stuff, another way to say it, in some cases. So keep all that in mind, because try to figure out what's going on here. It's bigger picture stuff, and don't necessarily worry about exact names and dates unless I ask you to. So anyway, you'll read about the French philosophers, laissez-faire. You'll read about laissez-faire or laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is the correct pronunciation. Understand what that is, and all it means is that it refers to markets and economies, and it's like pure capitalism, if you will. And so it means total hands-off. It means an economy and a society set up where you can start your own business and do whatever you want to do, and the government won't interfere at all. And that works great, in theory, until you start, buying meat from meat companies with no government interference, and then you find out there's some inspection issues. So sometimes government interference is a good thing, sometimes it's not, but that's up for you to decide. So so you'll read about the American Revolution, and one of the things that I threatened to put on the quiz, and I'll look at the quiz in a minute, was that you should know the ideas and events that led to the American Revolution. And I think most of you, if you haven't had American history, remember it out of high school history, but just sort of a reminder of the ideas and the events that lead to the American Revolution. So the ideas are the old, taxation without representation thing. This idea that the colonists here in North America were offended by British Parliament control of the colonies. So this idea of independence grew. So that's the idea, this idea against the tyranny of the British Parliament, and this idea about independence. And then the events are, could be anything, but generally like the stamp tax or the tea tax or the Intolerable Acts or any of those things. And just sort of know that here's a little microcosm of the colonies rebelling against Parliament. So action, reaction, the action of British taxation the reaction is colonist rebelling, like Boston Tea Party stuff. So keep that in mind. Also know when you read about natural law and natural rights of citizens that our Bill of Rights, so the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, that's what those are. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all of that stuff. That's really, if someone says, hey, what's natural law? Think about the Bill of Rights in our Constitution, because that kind of outlines these natural laws. So do that. There's a cool exhibit, National Archive exhibit on MindTap, and it's also in my reading notes. You should check it out. And it's kind of cool, but it also, the book talks about John Locke and Ben Franklin, and I think that exhibit does also, and they were big proponents of natural rights, that every human being, regardless of gender, color, whatever, has these built-in natural rights, and that's a real important thing that's happening in this Enlightenment period, that people are starting to think that way, and that's really like the opposite of absolutism. It's the opposite of kings getting to decide that they're going to marry your daughter, that sort of stuff. So, keep that in mind, because, again, this chapter is about transition from old to new, and natural law and natural rights is a big part of that. It really puts the power back to the people, so that's what it's all about. So that's the American Revolution. Sorry this is going so long. I always do this. Changes in Western Europe is section 18.4 in MindTap, and that talks about enlightened absolutism. And you should read about that. I make a statement in my notes about it's a dichotomy of enlightened absolutism. Like, what does that mean? Because enlightened thought generally means the people get to decide what they want, but absolutism means that the monarch is in absolute control. So basically, enlightened absolutism was a reaction by monarchs to revolutions. Like, if the French Revolution's happening next door to your country, you're going to make some changes real quick to make people happy so they won't revolt. So that's that. And also, so when you read about the changes in Western Europe, one of the things I say in the notes, I ask you, how is this different than what's going on in the United States or in the colonies? And most of you know, whether you've had history or not, that we never had a landed aristocracy here. We never had a big church network in the country. We never had kings and queens or these individual barons or huge landowners that ran the place. We never had that before. So the U.S. is coming from a totally different spot from Europe. And as you read about Europe, you'll learn there's a lot of old baggage in culture that they have to deal with, because a lot of these guys had control of their own little areas. They were dukes, and they had their castles, and now all of a sudden they're losing that because the people are starting to take over through more democratic governments. So that's kind of what's starting to go on in Western Europe. And then finally, and again, I'm sorry this is going so long, but the French Revolution, read through that. It's totally different than the American Revolution, because again, it was the French people rising up against a monarchy who had totally lost touch with the people. I mean, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, they're living in Versailles. They're filthy rich. They could care less about the people. And, 75% of the people in France are peasants with nothing. So, when communication starts, when people start to talk, and sort of this public sphere, this citizens coalition starts to form, then the citizens get together and say, hey, look, we've been being ripped off by the king. So that's what the French Revolution's about, so understand that. So lastly, and again, sorry this is like taking 13 minutes so far. I don't even like to go over 10, but I'm going to go through the quiz real quick. If you held on this long, it'll be a good thing. So I'll just sort of go through the questions generally. So there's a question about the American Revolution, and it occurred in response to what? So understand that, and I talked about it a little bit. But again, this is a multiple choice quiz that seems really easy, but if you have not read the work or the text, or you don't kind of grasp what it says, it's going to be extremely difficult for you. So question 1, the American Revolution occurred in response to what? That'll be pretty easy for you to figure out. And then what else do we ask here? What are the differences, primary differences between the French Revolution and the American Revolution? So again, I kind of talked about that, but the French Revolution was really a revolt over the king in the old order, against the king in the old order. So I'll give you that much. You can figure out the rest. And let's see, there's a question about the North American colonies again and the European countries and sort of the differences between the two when it came to reforms and changes. And then there's a sort of a weird question that asks you for a set of words that I provide that align best with Enlightenment thought. And you'll be able to figure that out if you've done the reading. And then finally, there's just a question about the main points covered in the chapter, which is easy because one of the answers is so easy I'm not even going to read it to you, but you'll get it. So simple quiz, just kind of go through it. It's not in MindTap, it's in Blackboard, and it's our standard quiz. So thanks a lot. Sorry this went so long. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a great day. Be safe. See you next week. Bye-bye.